As a child, I became aware of Westminster College as sort of a presence in our home. My grandmother was a graduate of the first regular graduating class. My father and his brother and sister were all Westminster graduates. And I would hear them talking about Westminster College, so I just became gradually aware of Westminster College. I decided when I was in high school that I wanted to go to Yale. And my father seemed to be amenable to the idea. But he approached me and he said, what would you think of starting at Westminster? It occurred to me that I would save enough money by finishing at Westminster that I could afford, on the same amount of money, a year of graduate school to get my master's degree. So that's what happened to Yale. They never got me. Because by the time I graduated from Westminster, I'd become more interested in anything else than playwriting. Well, the end of the story, as far as that's concerned, is I never got back to graduate school, so I started taking graduate courses at Westminster. And it just seemed like coming home. And I thought, well, you know, I don't belong in administration. I belong in the classroom. And, so that's my story.
So what was your tenure here? How many years did you teach for Westminster?
I started teaching radio courses part-time. I was in the radio business for, I guess, about 10 or 11 years. And I was teaching radio and speech courses. And then I was drafted into, I started on the college faculty in 1946. I started in full-time in administration as alumni secretary in 1949, and I was in administration for 16 years. 11 years as alumni secretary, 5 years as the assistant to the president for development. The job, I was the first one to hold the job, which is now vice president for development. And after 16 years of that, meanwhile, I'd started taking my graduate courses, and I thought, well, what I really want is to get back in the classroom. If there's some way I can get back in there, and so I did. The last 12 years, well, you know, I guess 46 to 94, 95 is very close to 50 years. But the thing that I really enjoyed the most was my 12 years in the English department before I retired. That was a frosting on the cake. I really loved that. I liked teaching.
In your opinion, Paul, who was the best president, or what was the best administration that Westminster ever had?
To give you an honest answer on that, I really could not, I don't think, pick out one president, because each one of them had particular talents, and interesting enough, their special talents seemed to fit the needs of the college. Now, there were 3 of the presidents who never had a chance. They came in after periods of disruption. They had short disruptive periods, and they only were here 1 year, 2.5 years, one of them was 3 years. I don't blame it on the presidents. I blame it more on the situation that developed and that they inherited. But I have to eliminate those 3 presidents because they didn't do very much because they really never had a chance. Now you take all the rest of the presidents, and I can look at them one by one, and every one of them made a significant contribution to the college. You take Dr. Orr, the need for the time, this was a time of expansion. You needed somebody with particular talents and interest in building, developing campus, buildings, raising money, and so on. Boy, he could do it better than any other president we ever had. Well, that's what we needed right then. Being so much interested in the academic program and feeling that the current trend is to push the academic program into the background, and the main show seems to be public relations and fundraising, and of course big money athletics and so on. I'm particularly interested in the ones who have made significant contributions to the academic development of the college, and I would have to pick out two on that, and one of them is President Jeffers, who brought the college away from the old ancient languages curriculum into the much more modern curriculum. And the other one would have to be President Wallace, who made a specialty of trying to upgrade the college academic.
How would you assess the present administration and its contributions to the college?
I think it's very hard to judge. You know, the last chapter, in my personal perspective, was setting the stage for the Rennick administration. I said at the time, it was 3 years into the administration, I said, I don't think a person's going to be able to really evaluate this administration until it is completed, and it'll be easier to do it a few years after it's completed.
Where do you see Westminster in the next 10 years, Paul? Can you project?
I don't really know.
Where are we headed?
There has been this trend towards vocationalism, a trend away from what I would consider the traditional liberal arts. Particularly, I'm particularly sensitive about the humanities because this is my area. Literature, history, philosophy, these things that develop the personality of and the character of a person seem so tremendously important to me. They don't help you earn a living. Well, they certainly help you to live. And that's more important than earning a living as far as I'm concerned. But the trend, you know, in the past we've had these trends toward vocationalism that have turned and gone the other way. And I'm wondering if this time they will do that. Now, I guess my projection for 10 years might be based more on hope than anything else. I would hope that there would be a trend, and I think there have been some evidences of it, of a higher value on the humanities and the broad liberal arts education. We have done a pretty good job of trying to develop vocationalism here while still requiring a fairly broad spectrum of subjects. But it still makes me feel a little sad to think that a student can graduate now with an AB degree without ever having taken a single history course or a single course in English or American literature. Those were key things in the liberal arts education. And
maybe today we're getting a little better at learning how to integrate skills in a liberal arts education.
That's a good point, and that may very well be true. You know,
learning how to use that liberal arts education
yes,
and making the most of it.
I've been encouraged by the fact that we do still require quite a broad spectrum of subjects they have their vocational majors, but outside of their majors they still have to take a number of these other things that will ensure a fairly broad education. But
That's
they
right.
still might graduate without a history course or a course in American and English literature.
Paul, what would you think is Westminster's strength? Something that has sustained it over the years, that's allowed it to endure?
I suppose I might be biased as a historian, as a college historian, but I really think that the college's strength is in its history, in the tradition, in the building of generation after generation of alumni, all of whom have helped create a long tradition of good, sound academic respectability. I sort of steer away from that term excellence. It has been overworked so much.
What's its biggest weakness?
I suppose that being somewhat isolated from the, quote, real world. You mean as college historian? I don't know. I am retiring as curator of the archives, but I'm still a college historian. And whoever comes along after I do will, of course, not have the dimensions of background in family relationships and the long association with the college. On the other hand, he may have a better grasp of a better way of presenting history and so on. He will probably have some attributes that I do not have, but I don't know who he is.
Or she, maybe.
Excuse me. That was a slip.
It's okay. Paul, is there anything that you'd like to talk about that you haven't included in your history of Westminster College? What's not in here? What's not in this book?
Well, I tell you, I have written on several other subjects and gone into considerably more depth than as included in here. And I was just thinking about this the other day. In fact, I was talking to my son about it. My son was a college professor, and he is now in financial journalism, but he has been writing some bank histories, and he likes writing history, and he has a real talent for it. I was telling him just the other day, he came up to help us move, that a daydream that had very little chance of ever becoming a reality was that if I was still around the turn of the century and still had my faculties, what I would love to do would be to collaborate with him on turning out a history that would bring, I wrote extensively, I researched extensively on Westminster's place as a pioneer in coeducation. One of the last things I did was to trace economic and vocational influences on Westminster right from the beginning, right down to the present time.